We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. If you're watching YouTube, I got a bandage on my head because I bonked it on the stairs next to my aunt's computer when I was fixing her printer. I'm like, oh, let's reach over back here real quick and grab the printer cable and crack. And hey, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the term blading in wrestling, but it was as though I had bladed. It was considerably more red stuff coming out than you would have thought from a little conk on some stairs. But yeah, I guess I hit that just right. So I've got some glue holding my skin together right now.
I am of the age where I get mysterious bruises. I've gotten to that age where I look down and go, what the hell is that from? Like, I have no clue, no recollection of doing it. It's just bruised. Like, I have a bruise on my leg, no idea. I have a cut on my left arm, left shoulder, no idea. Yep. None. Wonderful. No recollection whatsoever of how that might have happened.
Norm Macdonald bit. Rest in peace, Norm Macdonald. But I love that bit where he's like, talked to my grandmother. She had this huge bruise on her arm. I said, where'd you get that? She goes, the wind.
Not quite there yet, but it feels that way.
Getting there.
I mean, between cycling and rock climbing and 2 dogs and 2 children, my eldest should be
one is away
exiting my house shortly. I've got lots of reasons to have bruises, that's for sure. All right, let's just get right into this podcast. Sure. I am wiped. I am just absolutely wrecked. God,
I shouldn't move my eyebrows so much. It's gonna bust something open.
Pop your.
It's
your
hard.
glue.
I'm expressive. This is gonna be a challenge. This is no good at all. Okay.
I swear to you, this is absolutely true. I had a drama teacher when I was in college, first couple of years of college. His name was John White. And he is he had the opposite expressions from everybody you know. Okay. Like he talked constantly with his eyebrows up and his brow furrowed. Like, he talked like that constantly. Okay. And when he got serious, he lowered his brows. Right? So you knew when he got serious because his forehead would go flat. And you're like, it was so bizarre to watch him talk. It was so weird. All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your question answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com, catch up on our previous episodes, also see our show notes for this episode, as well as the Flickr album that will have all the images of which we speak. I will try to describe them to you, but sometimes I read the description, still don't understand it. Yep. Put it into my own words and go, that probably didn't help. And boy, I hope you guys are looking at the pictures. So avrant.com is where you can find that. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see our live recording sessions and all of their desynced glory.
Yep.
Highest of quality YouTube videos, really. Really quite is. If you're used to watching TikTok, then this should not bother you at all because desynced audio is just a fact of life over there. So
that and the Google voice narrating everything.
Oh God, yes. And then the people, I think there's a new sort of thing going on where, like, if you get the lip sync just right, people will love your video just because you did it, because it seems impossible now. Contact us directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. Thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation. We had 2 of those this week. We had Dale and Bill. And Bill is a repeat offender when it comes to giving us money over at PayPal. So we thank both of you, Dale and Bill.
Yes, well, Dale, Bill, thank you both very much for the PayPal donations. I should mention, Dale specifically said in his email that all the money he put into the PayPal this week is meant to go to Tom because he sent money directly to me in another form, which we'll mention in just a moment. So, yeah, But that works. PayPal. You can find the link on our website, avrant.com. And thank you very much for the financial support.
Once it comes to me, Daniel, you don't know how I'm going to do what I'm going to do with this. Don't worry about it. Okay? I spend it as I will.
Pretty much.
I'm going to give it to Rob if I want to, and you can't stop me. Speaking of which, Dale did send Rob a Amazon Canada gift card.
That's right.
Which would be of no use to me. So.
He signed up for an account and everything just so he could send an Amazon.ca gift card.
That was super nice.
It is super nice. Effort and money.
Seems like a nice fellow.
It
that
really
Dale guy.
Thank you, Dale.
It's actually the second Dale. I met a guy named Dale this week, or since the last podcast, which was unusual. I think. I feel like Dale's an unusual name. Maybe it's not. I don't know. All right, if you can't support us in one of those,
we missed Patreon somehow.
Did I skip it?
I'm pretty sure.
I did. I scrolled past it. We want to thank our 138 patrons over at patreon.com. This is another financial way you can support us. Patreon's a service where you can sign up to be a monthly contributing, supporting listener of our podcasting members of our community who support us financially. Rolls right off the tongue there. 138 of those people signed up so that at least $1 is taken from them, and most of it is given to us. And they take it once a month over at Patreon. So thank you to our 138 patrons. And that includes Daniel and Bertrand. So thank you. Probably the same. Wait, no. Similar. I don't know. Anyways, Daniel and Bertrand.
Yes, that's
and
right.
136 other people.
Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast is the place to go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thank you to our 138 patrons, Daniel and Bertrand. Thank you for being two of them.
Yeah, I mentioned I was tired.
Nah.
Fairly tired this week. We already talked about Dale and his gift card. Gurinder pointed out that SVS gave us a shout out in their recent email newsletter about their new SoundPath ultra high speed HDMI cable. So that's nice of them to do that.
It is.
I do like that we got
highlighted as a link and everything.
First billing over AVS Forum. I do appreciate that more than any of it.
Considerably more people who would have seen it on AVS Forum, but that's quite all right. Who knows? Welcome to anybody who found us that way. We appreciate it.
That's right. That's right. So if you, like I said, if you support the podcast in some way, just let us know. So Gurinder let us know that this happened. So we're thanking him for showing us. Joseph gave us a shout out to Electronics for Less in Canada when he bought an SVS SB3000 subwoofer for him.
Very nice. Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah. Bill sent some photos to me with permission to use on AV Gadgets, so thank you, Bill.
Yeah, that's avgadgets.com, where Tom is editor-in-chief, so if you send in photos with permission to use them in perpetuity, Tom very well might use that to illustrate something on the website avgadgets.com.
Yeah, I finally found a use for that oscilloscope one.
Ah, nice.
That's somebody sent me a while back. I was like, yes, oscilloscope. We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during this ongoing and seemingly never-ending pandemic. We got Dale, who says he really appreciates what we do and how we do it. We've been his go-to anytime he wants to watch something, but now he's made it through every single episode we've ever posted on YouTube. Can't believe that happened. I feel like there's not enough hours in anybody's
incomprehensible
life. You must have slept through some of them, and even at double speed, it feels like a lot of hours. Feels like he's having withdrawals now with only one episode per week. Perhaps he'll go to our website and listen to the even older episodes. Wow, that would be way back. Dina days. I mean, that'd be a long time ago.
Did we have many episodes with Liz that were video? I don't think we had that many with Liz that were video. We had some.
We had that many.
We had some. So there'll be a lot more Liz. There'll be a lot more Liz without any Rob around to mess things up. So those will be fun to listen to. And then Dina, if you've been working backwards,
you can hear me saying some wrong things.
If been working
you
backwards,
can absolutely hear me saying some wrong things. So, because Tom was, as science has progressed, Tom's views have progressed, and I have changed. I have changed my tune. In fact, you got me thinking about that infrasonic elephant thing, and I looked it up. I am like writing an article that's going to make some people real angry. I'm like, I think this is all. I think Rob's onto something here. I think this is all BS. I think that infrasonic sound is is a myth. I mean, it's not a myth; it exists, but I don't think it does.
I mean, it's
anything.
in the name. It's infrasonic. It is below sonic.
We've always believed that these very, very low sounds in some way affect us.
Right.
And I'm like, these scientists work with elephants who are screaming 14 hertz notes.
Yeah.
Screaming them so loud that they can be heard by other elephants over 2.5 miles away. And they were like, we had no idea what was going on. Like, really? And no feeling of dread?
People
like
who
what they say you get when you
lived amongst the elephants had no idea that that frequency was being produced. So I will say this, if you had something like a butt kicker tapping you on the seat at 12 or 14 hertz.
Right.
I do imagine you would feel that. I mean, that's the same as me just coming up and knocking on your chair 10 times a second or something. So that you would feel, but when it's in the form of a sound wave, I question it a bit.
Yeah. I question it a lot more than that.
Now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you brought it up and
Yeah.
you pointed it out, and I'm doing some extra research into it and seeing, I mean, they were actually, so they were, I didn't quite get totally into it. I know we're totally off track now, but they were like talking about what frequencies, infrasonic frequencies would like your body, parts of your body would sympathetically vibrate to so that you could actually feel it. And it's like, well, at this frequency, you could, as long as it was 150 decibels or higher. Like, holy crap! You know?
Yeah, even the 21-inch subwoofers, it would be a challenge.
Like 150 dB. I'm like, have you guys lost your minds? The whole house is vibrating. You're not feeling it. You're just hearing the house.
Right, sure, yes.
All right.
That was Dave.
Mike. Mike says it was a blast seeing his theater on YouTube and having us talk about it. He showed his friends and family, and he's internet famous now.
That's right.
So, yes, you are. Welcome to the... I got a T-shirt that says that. I think it died slow and washed slowly to death, but I had it. Daniel says he visits Vancouver usually twice a year. He'd be up for treating Rob to lunch one day. As for Florida, he's not as keen right now. Hey, I live here. I'm not very keen either. But he might go to Disney World, so if Tom can meet him there. I'm like an hour away from Disney World, so maybe an hour and a half. You can make the trip. My town's much nicer than Orlando. We got notes of gratitude from Ben, from Bertrand, from Jazz, who's part of the 2 Hour Plus Club. But current fuel prices mean less driving, so he has to break up our episodes into chunks at a time, which is probably fine. Ryan and Joseph.
It sounded like you said Jazz. It was
from...
Dazz. It sounded like Jazz when you said.
Did I say Jazz?
It
Dazz.
sounded that way to my
Dazz,
ears.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Dazz. Yeah, and Ryan and Joseph. There we go. So
Jazzy Dazz.
That's right.
DJ Dazzy Jeff. I don't know. Something like that. Dale, notes of gratitude from Dale, Mike, Daniel, Ben, Bertrand, Dazz, Ryan, and Joseph. Thank you for thanking us.
That is it. I'll say them one more time. Dale, Mike, Daniel, Ben, Bertrand, Dazz, Ryan, and Joseph. Thank you very much for sending us the notes of gratitude, for keeping the podcast going. The notes of encouragement are certainly appreciated. So a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right. So we got one piece of news for this week, and it's from Netflix. They suck. No, I'm sorry. That's not news. Everybody knows that. Netflix has teamed up with Sennheiser to offer AMBEO is what I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
AMBEO 2-channel spatial audio. On select titles, you'll see it referenced by all sorts of different names: spatial audio, enhanced stereo, Sennheiser AMBEO, but Netflix says to type spatial audio, which is SPATIAL, because the T is always non-intuitive to me, into the search bar in order to see the list of titles that support it. And if you're using a 2-channel audio system, it's now the default audio track for titles that support it. If you're using 5.1 or Dolby Atmos sound system, you'll get those audio tracks as normal. Unlike Apple's spatial audio, which Netflix also supports, this version from Sennheiser AMBEO works with any 2-channel audio system, not just AirPods. It's an actual remastered soundtrack that starts with the surround sound or immersive audio mix and is encoded into 2-channel using Sennheiser's AMBEO rendering, which they claim respects the original mix, tonal balance, and dialogue integrity.
So it's down mixing with some phase information included.
Yeah, it's just really there's really super nothing different here. So The thing that I didn't realize until I did some research for an article recently is that when a sound mixer is mixing an audio track for a movie or anything, right? The software they are using has the ability to render that in. So say they're doing Atmos, right? It has the ability to play it back in Atmos and then switch it to whatever format you want, all the way down to stereo. I mean, maybe even mono, I don't know, but all the way down to stereo. So they can listen in all of these different, so it does its own down mixing. There's some presets, but it's also adjustable by them. So they can listen to all the different down mix options that you might experience. And if they can just leave the defaults as is and just press print or whatever it is, render, or they can go through, listen to each one, tweak it so that it sounds good to them. And a lot of times what they'll do, like if a sound was anchored behind the in the surround mix, when they down mix it to 2-channel, they'll manually say, okay, that sound needs to be placed here because it sounds weird trying to place it behind you with 2 channels. So place it instead more on this side of the room, and that'll be the 2-channel. So they have that ability to do all that. This is just another way of doing that, but then, tries to keep more of that, like Rob said, the phase information to try to trick your ear into it being behind you, which is not magic, and your receiver can do that too, all by itself. So, it's what it is. It's fine. It's something, I guess. I don't care.
They know most people are watching on just the built-in speakers of the TV, so if it helps it make it sound any larger and more expansive, then that's fine. It's not like you really get a choice. So, but it's just for us home theater nerds realizing that it's a different brand of upmixing going on behind the scenes. It is now Sennheiser AMBEO, which of course was doing down mixing used to be available in their Sennheiser AMBEO sound bars. Of course, that's where the name came from, and now it's being parceled out as a separate technology to something else. So a little bit of interest there. That's about it. Yeah. There wasn't much else happening in the news, which is fine because we had oodles of questions come into us this week.
You'll have to forget. I am so thirsty right now.
Tom is drinking every chance he gets.
I am so thirsty. I got back from cycling and it was rain. It rained during the ride, which I hate. And I was lied to by my weatherman because I checked multiple times. Which means I have to clean the bike when I get back. So that just... And then my bike stand, which I put the bike stand that holds the bike up so I can clean it and service it, started to fall apart. Like the bike started sliding off the front of it. I was like, what's happening? So I had to fix that too. So I didn't get a chance to really hydrate properly after my ride. Aras, here's our first question of the day. Aras says, this is like a long question, isn't it?
It's going to be.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long one. Okay, so everybody dig in to get a drink, grab some pretzels. Aras has the floor.
Yes,
He's got the speaking stick, or whatever they call it. So inspection and appraisal on their new house is done, so it looks like July 22nd will be the closing date. Congratulations.
Yes, congrats, first and foremost.
Yeah. I do know somebody whose house went on the market like the day after the interest rates went up, and now they can't sell it. Like, oh, God, it's so bad. Anyway, Aras says thank you for all the advice we provided so far. He has some updates and a bunch of new questions to ask. I hope they all involve not buying things because you don't.
I can't even remember at this point. This is going back like 2-3 weeks by the time we finally got to this. So,
well, I'm sorry, Aras. It's all Rob's fault. First up, he's 100% certain at this point the theater will be going into this room with the fireplace currently open to the kitchen and beside the utility room. So, okay. So now we know for sure it's going in this room. It's got hardwood floors. It's got obviously a fireplace at the front with a mantle and a door off to the right, which I think is the utility room. And there's a bathroom down there. It's a small staircase going up into the kitchen, I believe. And yeah.
Yep.
And but it's sort of open and
it's like a half floor down, and so the kitchen has an opening into this room plus the half stairway going down there as well.
So on the opposite side of the opposite wall behind. So the long ways, the fireplace is on the small wall. There's 2 long walls, of course, on the sides, and then behind it is where you go up into the kitchen with 2 openings.
That's right.
2 openings go up there, which is a little Weird. So he fully understands now that it might not be possible without spending some more money than he has available to make it into the soundproof theater of his dreams. More on that later. But not to worry, he's still over the moon that he won't have attached neighbors to worry about, and he agrees it can be a fantastic experience, open or not. He was able to confirm that the kitchen has its own HVAC registers and air return, so he will definitely still consult with an HVAC specialist, but he's hopeful this might allow him to install a door at the bottom of the stairs and build a wall to close off the opening to the kitchen. Nothing for certain just yet, so on to some other questions. He was able to confirm that the exterior wall on the left, which would be on the left side if you're facing the fireplace.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually uses full 2x4 framing, so there's a full 4 inches between the drywall and the exterior brick. Since he already owns the in-wall KEF speakers he was intending to use as surrounds, do we foresee that being a problem anymore? And how concerned should he be about sound escaping if he uses in-walls? Well, I mean, these are exterior, so it's almost certainly insulated. I wouldn't see why it wouldn't be.
That would be weird. It would be weird to not have any insulation on your exterior walls. So, might be against code, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, if you open it up and it's just blank in there, I would be like, we have a problem.
Yeah, we got a bigger renovation that's much more important than the theater at that point. But this is... Yeah, so I mean, if it's only 2x4s, which is thin for an exterior wall, but if it's a full brick cladding on the outside, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Right. You would obviously have to move the insulation out of the way to make enough room for a backer box. You would definitely want to have a backer box. But then we have to question, even with the backer box maybe being lined inside, are we still getting the appropriate R value, or have we just made a hole for heat to go between the inside of the house and the outside of the house through that speaker opening? I don't love ever trying to put an in-wall speaker in an exterior wall unless you are constructing an entirely new set of framing within the existing structure, room within a room type stuff. Right. I'm not in love with putting in-wall speakers inside of an exterior wall. It's a can of worms.
How wide do we remember how wide this place was?
It's about 15 by 20, the overall space.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how deep are the KEFs with the backer boxes?
Well, I mean, they're meant to fit within a 2x4, so they're only 3.5 inches.
Yeah, say 4 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, he could build...
You could just erect a 2x4 wall on that left-hand side.
On that left-hand side.
I think his second question coming up is the more reasonable solution that I'm willing to entertain.
Okay, let's go to that.
Yeah.
All right, so what I was going to say before we go on is if you really want to continue to use these in-walls, which probably is problematic, I would consider putting up a either columns,
right,
where those speakers would go, and just install them in the columns, or a 2x4, just like a 2x4 stick framing all the way, through that wall, on that wall, and then cover it with fabric, and then you can run all your cables back there. So he says, in question number 2 of 1,000, he's got woodworking and finishing skills. Do we think it would be a better idea for him to make boxes for his in-walls and in-ceiling speakers to turn them into on-walls and on-ceiling? He knows he could make them look nice, and he can make them shallow so they wouldn't stick out any more than necessary. Thoughts? Well, yeah, that's what I just said. So columns would be what I was suggesting. So yes, that would work. I see no problems with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could do like what do they call that? It's like you see in like palaces and crap where they have like the big like beams, not really exposed,
like a
beams,
coffered
but like
ceiling,
decorative, coffered ceiling, and then you could do that across the top.
Could do that. I mean, what he's essentially asking there, or at least what I envisioned, was basically just building sealed speakers. You've got everything already made with the crossover and the drivers in the front baffle, and you're just constructing the enclosure to create a sealed speaker. I don't have any problem with that. I would, rather than just relying on our, approximately 1 cubic foot of internal volume is usually a good place that works, is usually a good thing to aim for, I would just go ahead and contact KEF directly. Just get their advice and say, okay, I'm planning on creating rear enclosures. How much internal air volume should they have? Based on that, you can work out whatever depth you want, and we'll create the length and width necessary to have the internal volume. But I would contact them directly, get their advice directly, rather than just going on rule of thumb. There's no reason you can't do that. There's absolutely no reason you can't make sealed speakers of your own. You're just making the rear enclosure, or exactly like Tom says, have it built into the room, but just in the sense of faux columns and a coffered ceiling and that type of thing, and build it in that way. Absolutely. I'm more in favor of that than trying to put it inside the existing external wall.
Yeah. So he's pretty darn set in getting the JVC NP5 projector now, after we talked about it a bunch. As we said, it's a lot less expensive than NZ8 he had originally envisioned.
Indeed.
Which is true. Now he's thinking, though, that he'd like to keep a 77-inch OLED and have the option of using either display. He found a ceiling mount on Amazon that lets you lift the TV so it's flat against the ceiling, and then it can pull down when you want to view it. That is a thing that exists. And
it does.
The fun thing is about whenever they show these pictures is the one thing they show is an image on the screen, and yet no wires at all going to that projector.
Not even going up into the ceiling, right, which is the only way that this would work.
Yeah. So he really likes that idea, although the exact mount he found isn't large enough for the 77-inch, so it would also position the TV too high for viewing, in his opinion. So he was thinking of constructing his own. He has it in mind that he still preferred to install a fixed frame projection screen in front of the fireplace, so he likes the idea of an OLED flipping up and down out of the way, and then pulling down in front of the projection screen when wanted, so that it's closer to the seats than the projection screen. He'd be running a new power line in the ceiling for the projector anyway, so he figured he could have an outlet for the TV in the ceiling too. He's assuming running an extension cord would be a no-go. That is correct.
Definitely do not run an extension cord anywhere inside of anything. If you do need to basically extend an existing circuit, it would be connecting Romex, proper wiring that is meant to go inside your walls or ceilings. You would extend things using that above your ceiling and then have an outlet attached properly. And as we always like to do for projectors, since we still like to err on the side of caution and have it plugged into a battery backup, what we would normally advise is that the outlet for your projector, rather than the Romex going for the ceiling outlet that you plug your projector into, rather than running that Romex back to your electrical panel, we would run it to a location close to where the rest of your equipment is going to be plugged in, and we would have it attached to a male inlet. So that you can just connect a regular power cord from your battery backup to that male inlet, which would then feed through the Romex, up through the wall and through the ceiling to the outlet by your projector. You have essentially created an up-to-code extension cord. That's how we would wire up a projector. And the same thing could definitely be done for the television. Both of those things could be on the same circuit. There's no reason that you couldn't have the outlet just wired in series between the projector outlet and the TV outlet, but we'll get back to this TV nestled against the ceiling idea.
Right.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. I understand what's going on here.
Uh-huh.
I think it's a fairly terrible idea.
I am not a fan of this idea.
Just generally speaking, I feel like you're gonna prefer one or the other, and then the other one will just be there.
Yeah,
always.
I'm also still not a fan of a fixed frame screen in front of the fireplace. I know he says he's handy and they don't intend to use the fireplace, but I'm like, if you want to have both displays available, you could go with a mantle mount. So this is the one where the TV, when it's pushed up against the back of the fireplace, is too high, but then they have these fireplace mantle mounts that pull down. So they pull forward and down. So when you're not using the flat panel, it's pushed up like basically against the ceiling above the mantle there, or maybe you lower that mantle a little bit since it's up pretty high. But the TV would be against the brick of the fireplace and up high, but then it's on the type of fire above the fireplace mount that pulls the TV forward and down when you want to use it. And then I would definitely have a motorized projection screen that is attached to your ceiling, and that way that could come down in front of the flat panel when you want to use the projector. That's how I would 100% handle the dual display setup that way. I am not a fan of the mount that's going to like try and lift and hold the television up against the ceiling. To me, that's just a weird way of doing it. I understand that he's sort of thinking that'll let the TV be closer than the projection screen.
No, I
but,
understand. So I think there's two. I think the next question, because I kind of read forward here, will kind of explains why he wants to do it. There's two reasons he wants to do it this way.
That's
the first reason is what you just said, which is he wants the OLED to have a similar field of view.
Right.
So to have that, it needs to be physically closer because it's physically smaller.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree.
Yeah,
I think that.
It's not
So
the way
this
I
is.
would do it.
So if you really want this, if you really want to have this sort of field of view thing, if that's really what you're going for here, what Rob suggested, the mantle mount and then putting the projection screen in front, which it means that the projection screen would be by definition a little bit smaller than what you might be looking at if it was fixed frame, because it's going to be forward from the wall
closer
a little bit.
Yeah. Or it'll just be a bigger field of view, which you'll probably be happy with.
But what you could do is re-envision where you have your seats in the room and put your second row or your middle row, if you have three rows. I don't know how many you're going to be going for here. Have a row that is far too close to be considered
for the projection screen. But it's fine for the flat panel.
Right. That's where you sit when it's the flat when the flat panel, and then the middle is where you sit when you're watching on the projection screen. And then the projection, the TV just looks like there's a TV there, up on the mantle. Then you pull it down, and people are like, "Whoa, that's kind of convenient." And then you push it back up, and the screen drops from the ceiling, and they're like, "Oh my god, this is amazing."
That's right.
Right. So yes, the only way you're ever going to convince me personally to put a TV anywhere near a ceiling like this is if it slides down out of the ceiling through a slot straight down and then slides back up and disappears into like some sort of recess or whatever. And that can't happen here, obviously, because there's a floor above it.
Right.
It'd be weird. But this whole system that you're thinking of is just a recipe for disaster, I think. And I also think it's going to look really weird to have this. Like, what is that on the ceiling?
He was also wondering if having the flat panel flush against the ceiling would end up reflecting light back onto the screen, the projection screen, and sort of ruin his black levels or something. I'm not super concerned about that, but there is the possibility that because we're only talking about a 77-inch surface, not the entire ceiling, that it might cast a bit of an uneven light reflection that would show up as kind of a window type of thing on the screen, and that could look a little bit weird. So look, if you end up doing it, it is not so much with our blessing. We were against this. We think the much better idea is the traditional roll down screen that comes down in front of the fireplace, and the TV, if you want to keep the TV, the mantle mount that lets you push the TV up and against the brick and then pull it down and forward when you want to use it. And I love the idea of actually utilizing your two rows of seats rather than just, having the two rows of seats in case you have more people over. No, you would actually get use out of your two rows of seats this way. And I love that idea.
So, as we mentioned, he's leaning towards a fixed frame screen in front of the fireplace, which we don't agree with. He would like to see more AV's masking panels, which is the second reason why I think that he's going
and
in
I've
this
got a
direction,
solution here, too.
He wants to have the masking.
Yeah.
So could he construct a false wall in front of the fireplace? The answer is yes. It wouldn't have to be. It wouldn't have to block the utility room, and he could still have access to the fireplace for maintenance if needed. What do we think? Like Rob said, neither one of us is really 100% for this idea.
No. And I mean, yes, physically it's possible to do.
It's possible, yes.
But if you were concerned that you wanted your projection screen to have masking, Seymour AV sells their electric motorized screen with masking. They have both options, which is if you wanted to do the CinemaScope screen and then have masks that come down on the left and right so that it's the same image height, but you've made it narrower to make it 16 by 9 by having masks come down on the left and right. That is an option. Or they also have the option, which is a mask that comes down across the entire width of the top to turn the 16 by 9 screen into 2.35 to 1. The same as you would with a 16 by 9 normal screen with masking at the top and bottom. It does that with a roll down mask across the entire top, and I believe it actually jogs the screen up a little bit so that the center of the screen stays in the same place, but it gives you the aspect ratio that you want. So either form of masking is available. I do have to warn you, it is not cheap to do that. You'd be looking at about $3,800 for the size of screen that you were considering to get the all-electric roll-down version of it, but it is entirely doable, and if you sort of factor in the cost of like all the construction and everything that you wanted to do, plus the regular fixed-frame masking screens are not cheap. They're, a good $1,500 less, but I think you can sort of justify it if this is what you really want to do, and might not have been aware that the electric version with the masking is available from Seymour.
Right. So if he positions the projection screen to be just in front of the fireplace, he'd end up with a 12-foot viewing distance. If he goes acoustically transparent with either a false wall or mounting a roll-down screen farther forward to leave room for speakers behind it, he'd have a 10-foot viewing distance. He knows that his current 9 feet from his 77-inch OLED is not large enough as far as his desired field of view. So what screen size do we think would be best? He definitely wants to feel immersed, but not uncomfortable. We've talked a lot about how to figure out what your preferred field of view is. There is all the SMPTE, THX, everybody else has got their recommendations. But in the end, the only one who really knows what's comfortable for you is you. And that is where, there's only so much we can tell you. So Rob is going to take you through some of the...
just some of the numbers.
But... if you just put your chair where your chair is going to be for this, you can put a piece of tape on a wall, right, and figure out, this is the screen size I'm comfortable with, right? This is it, and from there you can say, okay, well now that's how big it is from this many inches from me to the wall, but the screen itself is actually going to be this many inches. What's the new? I mean, that's just a triangle. That's just doing whatever that is,
trigonometry. Yeah.
So
I mean,
you can figure it out.
With your current 77-inch screen size sitting 9 feet away, that's giving you a 34.5-degree field of view, which I will absolutely agree is on the small side if what you want is a cinematic experience. That's like just above what SMPTE recommends for regular 1080p HD TV, where they suggest a 32-degree field of view, but that's for television viewing at HD, not 4K resolution. And if you want a cinema experience, you want at the bare minimum a 36-degree field of view, and then if you like to sit in the front half of the theater, you might like as large as a 55-degree field of view. Some people do. But in general, we tend to find a 45-degree field of view to be really, really nice. That works perfectly within Dolby's specs for where they want your front, left, and right speakers, just to the outside edges of the screen. 22.5 degrees to the left, 22.5 degrees to the right, gives you that 45-degree field of view in between. That is the field of view at which you can see the entire screen by just shifting your eyes a little bit, but not having to physically turn your neck and your head at all to see it. So I like that. From 10 feet away, you'd be looking at a 115 inch diagonal, that 16 by 9 screen. From 12 feet away, it would be 137 inches, which is exactly one of the sizes that Seymour offers. So, I mean, looking at all that, I would say a very safe bet for you would be to get the 120 inch roll down screen, because you're going to mount that roll down screen to your ceiling. You'll be able to move it a little bit back or a little bit forward as desired, and it'll be right in that butter zone. You'll also be able to achieve a nice, bright, punchy HDR image from your JVC NP5 on a 120-inch screen. So I think that would be a really safe bet for you to get that screen size. If, however, you know for a fact that when you go to the movie theater, you like to sit in the front half of the theater, then go for like the 137. And again, maybe you'll end up pulling that a little bit forward, but you can do that with a ceiling-mounted motorized screen. So I think it'll be a 120 or a 137 from Seymour.
All right, so that's enough of that. On to some different topics, but also still Aras.
Yeah, that's right.
Aras is not giving up that talking stick. He's got it. He's holding on for dear life.
That's right.
So he says his daughter wants to get a TV for her bedroom, but wants to keep the budget to a maximum of $250.
Yes.
She's got a separate streaming device, so any suggestions for a TV? Nope.
Well, so number one, I would say if she wants a screen size any larger than 43 inches, you're going to want to look at the used market, because that's really about the only way you're going to find a half-decent TV for under $250 that's larger than 43 inches. But looking around at what's available new, since I'm not sure what's available to you used, if you head over to just bestbuy.com, TCL's S455 in the 43-inch size is available for $250 right now. It remains on sale. That is the replacement for the outgoing S435. And as far as I know, we haven't actually gotten like the Artings or Vincentio type of full review for the S455 just yet. So I am making a little bit of a precarious assumption that they haven't drastically changed, because it is the direct replacement going from the 435 to the 455. The reason I bring all that up is because there is a model in between, the S446, and you want to avoid the S446 for two reasons. One, any of the TCL models that end in a 6, they're using either Android TV or Google TV as the operating system, and it has been full of bugs that they have not all been resolved yet. The ones that end in a 5 are still using Roku TV that TCL's been doing for years, and it's very stable and works very nicely. It's not so much that you're going to use the Roku built-in, because you say she already has a separate streaming device. It's just as an operating system for the TV, the Roku TV is very stable on TCL's, and the Android TV and Google TV is not just yet. But also the S446 uses an IPS LCD panel instead of the VA, vertically aligned LCD panel, that was in the 435, and like I say, I'm precariously assuming also in the 455. I'm not 100% sure that the S455 is in fact a VA panel, but like I say, it's the direct replacement for the 435, which was definitely a VA panel. So much better black levels in contrast using a VA LCD panel versus an IPS LCD panel. So yeah, over at Best Buy, TCL 43-inch S455 is where I would point you for $250, or go used.
All right. Last but not least, he says, if there are 3 people in the house all doing streaming or gaming at the same time, what sort of internet speeds would be worth it? Would 300 megabits per second be enough? I have actually no idea. I have threatened, cajoled, and terrified my children and wife into believing that if they so much as look at the internet when I'm doing this podcast, that the entire house will burn down.
I mean, we still have plenty of Skype glitches, so who knows what's actually going on.
So, right now, I know my son is in the other room playing Terraria, which is not online. He's not playing with friends right now. So he's just playing locally. My other son is almost certainly doing something online, but it's not streaming. Rarely is streaming. I mean, it could be. But my wife has been in the other room doing stuff, and I honestly don't even know. I could do a speed test right now to tell you what my internet is. But the most important thing I think to do in your home theater is to hardwire. I think
it does help.
More than anything else, that is the most important thing you can do, and it is so not hard. So when I moved into this house, and this has changed since COVID, and we did a little bit of renovations because we had to. But when I moved into this house, my router and modem were in the garage, which was not optimal, but that's where it was. It's where the guy had it. I don't know why he had it out there, but that's where he had it. Didn't reach some of the bedrooms, and we got a mesh system to kind of help out with that. But what I did almost immediately was that I just bought a big spool of Ethernet and just ran it from my garage all the way to my home theater, and I ran around the outside of the house. I just tucked it into the eaves, and then drilled a hole in through the wall with one of those little rubber grommets that that you're supposed to use on either side, and ran. I've got like a freaking spool of it in here. Like I can run this HDMI, this Ethernet cable like to any room of my house from my home theater, which goes outside all the way. And I'm obviously the speeds are not a problem with Ethernet at that distance. It really doesn't make any difference. So the number one thing you can do is get it is hardwired to your home theater, and then let everybody else be damned. As far as I'm concerned, make them
but he has the options
wirelessly
from his internet service provider of what package to get. The 150 megabits per second, 300 up to 1 gigabit per second or whatever it is that's going to be available. So I mean, the sort of rule of thumb these days is to have 50 megabits per second for each person. So if it's 3 people, 150 should be enough by the sort of rule of thumb. If the package that's on sale
really
is
get that though.
Yeah, you don't usually actually get that exactly. So the 300 is probably a safer bet. You should be fine if you have the 300 megabit per second package for 3 people in the household. You should be fine with that. How many things are using more than 100 megabits per second through the internet? I can't think of too many, and so yeah, that should be fine.
When I first started doing this podcast, and even, pre-Rob and stuff like that, we would Liz and I would send each other, or she would send me not FLAC files, that we would send each other WAV files, the original WAV files, which was a nightmare. And she had fiber, and I didn't.
Yeah,
and the upload speeds were in she's like, mine's uploaded. I'm like, it hasn't even really started.
That's right.
Yet on my side. So yeah, I would get the 300. I wouldn't do less than that. Ben's email was a victim of our email problems a couple of weeks ago, so apologies and thanks for double checking.
Yes, thank you.
Ben has a fully enclosed dedicated theater room. It's roughly 16 by 12 by 8. So just a little over 1,500 cubic feet in volume, air volume. He wants to sit 9 feet from a 100-inch screen, which would give him a 44-degree field of view.
All sounds good.
It's all doable within that room. He's very comfortable with DIY, so he's considering building either a false wall up front or just a frame for an acoustically transparent screen that would go 12 inches from the front wall. Space is tight, and as we'll get to in a moment, he'd like to go with on-wall speakers. So would this setup be preferable, or should he just hang a normal screen on the front wall and have his front speakers on either side and below the screen? So he wants a
100-inch screen, just straight up 100-inch screen.
Yeah, for 12 foot wide, still has enough room on either side at 12 feet wide.
Oh, definitely.
For speakers. So,
And below the screen of a 100-inch, it's not going to be any close to the floor or anything like that.
Right.
I am 100% in favor in this scenario of just getting the normal fixed frame screen, not acoustically transparent, mounting it directly on the front wall, and having my left and right speakers on either side and my center below the screen. I would 100% do that in this scenario.
I would as well. I mean, the cost to aesthetics ratio just don't make sense to me. But if he's asking, is this a thing that I can do? The answer is yes. You can absolutely do it the way that you're talking about. Putting on-wall speakers behind an acoustically transparent screen. You honestly don't even have to go acoustically transparent. You could build a false wall, have by the same screen Rob was just talking about, a fixed frame, normal fixed frame screen, and then putting the on-wall speakers around it the way that you would normal speakers. You would still get that clean look, but you wouldn't have to pay for the acoustically transparent screen, which is going to be a big part of this. I don't know how important aesthetics are to you. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're thinking it either has to be acoustically transparent or it has to be on the wall and I have normal speakers, the answer is that's not true. You can still do the false wall look, the really clean look up front. And it could even be, it doesn't have to be 12 inches. It could be less than that because it's just however deep your on-wall speakers are. And then you get the regular screen, but you still put the speakers around the outside. So...
I mean, to me, I'm just envisioning that he's thinking, if you're going to go projection, then the ideal is that your center speaker is at exactly the same height. It's no lower or higher than your left and right speakers. It's vertically oriented instead of horizontally oriented. I think that's what's in his mind. And I'm
Could be.
With a 100-inch screen, I am not worried at all. If this were a 150-inch screen, then I'm starting to be like, that's going to force your center speaker to either be so low or so high that it actually is a bit of an audible issue. But at 100 inches, I'm not worried whatsoever. So I would have the speakers not behind the screen. I would have them around the screen, and then we're going to do whatever you want to do for aesthetics.
Yeah. I cannot tell you how overstated it is on Reddit and the forums, the importance of having your center speaker be the same height as everything else.
It's just another way to gatekeep, Tom. That's what it really is.
That is exactly what it is. It's like same thing with this. Your TV is too high by an inch or two or whatever. It's just gatekeeping.
Yeah.
It is so remarkably hard to stop your brain from putting the voices where they should be and the noises where they should be. Like, it is so remarkably hard to do that. Like, you can close your eyes and like orient the speaker where it's coming from in your mind. You know it's there. You know where it's coming from. And you open your eyes and boom, it goes right back into people's mouths again. You can. I talked about this a while ago, but I went and saw this ABBA cover band, and the speakers were like 50 feet in the air. And it still looked like it was coming out of her mouth to my eyes. You know what I mean? They are 45, 50 degrees difference, in height from my point of view, from where I was sitting, and still those voices were coming straight from her mouth, as far as or whoever was singing's mouth. So don't get tied up on that. But if the aesthetics are important to you, you could still do the on-wall thing. And,
just have a fabric covering in front of them to hide them visually.
Yeah, exactly. If we were to end up with an acoustically transparent screen, would the weave be visible from 9 feet away? Would Seymour AV Center Stage UF fabric avoid any visible weave? So this thing comes up a lot when we talk about the Elite screens. Acoustically transparent. 9 feet is close for them.
Yeah.
That said, I have seen that screen myself.
Yeah, the ultrafine.
The UF. No, not the Seymour. The Elite screen.
Oh, the Elite one. Okay.
That's what Clint has.
Yeah.
Clint has that in his home theater, and I talked about that a little bit with him. He's like, I've never seen the weave. I mean, he sits probably a little bit further away than this, so it's gonna be close. It's it's a huge. I'm not huge. There's a significant difference or delta in the price of these two screens. So I would highly recommend that you get samples of both.
I mean, the ultrafine is about as good as it's going to get as far as not seeing the weave. The ultrafine name lives up to its name. But yeah, even that one, it's like 10 feet, you're almost certainly not. 9, it's like it's sort of right on that borderline where like if you're watching regular moving images, you're not going to notice the weave. It's only if there's like a solid color that goes up there and then transitions to another solid color. There's a possibility you might at 9 feet be able to see a little bit of the weave. It would be very questionable, but I mean, like we're saying, we don't really think you need it.
Yeah,
it would avoid all that.
If you go with just like a silver ticket, regular fixed frame screen, like I have, I sit closer than 9 feet, and I've never seen the.
Well, no, because that's just a flat, solid screen.
It's just a flat screen, yeah. So he's strongly considering the Sennheiser Sierra Duo speakers up front. This was Sierra Luna surrounds. He wants neutral, tell it like it is speakers. He's a little bit concerned about the ribbon tweeters being directional. So would they need to be towed in, or could he mount them flush on the walls?
So with the RAL ribbon tweeters that Ascend uses in the Sierra series, they have exceedingly wide horizontal dispersion. It's the vertical dispersion on them that's a little bit narrow. So I don't have really any qualms about you mounting those flush on the wall. You don't really need the left to right toe in to be well within the cone of dispersion, because the horizontal dispersion is really wide. This, of course, is going to make him all scared about what we just said about putting the center below the screen, because of the vertical dispersion thing. But the slightest bit of tilt is all you need to do. The slightest bit of tilt to make sure that all audience members are well within the vertical cone as well. It's still a good plus minus 15 degree vertical window.
Right.
Which by the time you get any distance away opens up pretty wide. So I'm not worried at all about the dispersion in this case, because the RAL ribbon tweeters are not like the folded ribbon tweeters that tend to be much more directional. These ones have the very wide horizontal dispersion. Yeah, I think this is a great choice. I don't think you can do a whole lot better for an on-wall.
So can the raw ribbon tweeters be rotated 90 degrees after purchase? If so, he'd feel better about there basically being no risk whether he decides on a vertical center behind the screen or a horizontal center below the screen.
You absolutely can. They are symmetrical and circular in the faceplate design, and you can absolutely just unscrew what's there, rotate it 90 degrees, and pop it right back in. So easy to do.
I will say that most speakers you can do that. Now, whether or not you should,
but certainly not all, so it doesn't hurt to check it all.
Yeah. And the other on-wall speakers we'd recommend just as highly. Well, we know Rob won't. So.
I mean, maybe the Focal 300 series? Maybe? Maybe. That'd be about it.
All right.
Yeah.
So he intends to go with two subwoofers in diagonally opposite corners. Should he get a pair of SVS SB1000 Pros or a pair of PC 2000 Pro cylinders? This is 1,500 cubic feet. I mean, you can. The PC 2000s will
that'd be well beyond. I mean, there is, of course, the SB 2000 Pro in between those two extremes.
Right.
Because, I mean, you straight up don't need the output capability of PC 2000s. Not that we love the cylinders around here, but
yeah, we do.
But there is the SB 2000 Pro that is, the footprint is not bigger than the cylinder, and it's less expensive than the cylinder, but more expensive than the 1000 Pro. I mean, we're going to say, if you don't listen at full reference volume, like ever, then SB 1000 Pros are going to be fine. If you want to be able to hit reference volume at 20 hertz, what a silly thing to even really be that worried about. But if that's what you want to do, then you'd probably want to step up to the 2000 Pro series. But I would definitely consider SB 2000 Pros in here for sure.
Right. As somebody who... has been in the home theater for a very long time, has his own dedicated theater, enjoys watching things at, considerable volume whenever possible. The number of times I have gotten to zero on my volume dial is exceedingly, so I can count the number of times I've gotten there. Thor Ragnarok, me trying to get bass out of it.
Well, that's because it was
got there.
Mastered incorrectly. So,
and since Disney has completely screwed their volume numbers, so that it used to be I listened to Disney around the same volume I listened to everything else, which was around in the 20s, minus 20 range, 24, 25, up to maybe minus 20, minus 18. Now I'm up around minus 4 with them, but I don't think that that's the same. I don't think that
it's mastered 10 decibels quieter. So
right. So I think we're well below what I would consider to be reference level, and I'm just telling you, man. I just so rarely people are like so worried about being able to hit full reference volume, and I'm like, but you're never gonna do it. No, I'm gonna do it all the time. That's how I like. No, you don't. You think you do.
I just sort of feel like if he goes SB 2000 Pros, he'll be happier.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. I'm just telling you, if you get the SB 1000s, you'll probably be fine. A difference. Yeah. So he says he knows I won't agree, but he really wants theater recliners. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I just think it's a poor choice.
I have them and I like them, so we're on the same team over here.
3 of them in a row, but room width is at a premium, so he's looked for smaller, narrower options. So not only are you limiting the amount of people you can put in a space, but now their butts have to also be very narrow. God forbid you have somebody over there who, like, I don't know, lived in Florida and eats Florida-sized portions. He found the Octane Charger XS300. Is that
that's just the name of the seats?
That sounds a lot like a iPad charger. Should he get those, or do we have another suggestion? I suggest you never, ever buy anything you haven't sat in.
Right.
So if you haven't sat in
right off the bat, I don't like the description of those Octane chargers because they use memory foam, and I hate memory foam on seats. First of all, it gets hot as all get out, and I hate sitting in anything that's memory foam for any length of time, but also it compresses over time. That memory foam does not bounce back. It bounces back for the first couple of weeks, and then it compresses and it just stays compressed. I hate memory foam in the seat of a so I'm not a fan of that. I like to point people to HT Market and their HT Design home theater recliners. Nicely affordable, really good quality. Do not use memory foam in their seat cushions. So they definitely have slimmer models, narrower models. They've got 3 that are basically all the same design: the Paget, the Warwick, and the Belmont. They just have different features, where the Paget is the least expensive but uses leather match for the fabric, so it's leather where you touch but vinyl everywhere else. The Warwick is all leather, and then the Belmont is all leather with a power headrest, so whatever level of features you want, you can go up and up. However, I would strongly consider sticking with HT Market and HT Design, but look at some of their other designs, some of them that have the completely flat seat bottom, and actually get them as a 3-seat couch configuration. The middle seat will just be an armless version. And then one thing I really like from HT Market is they have optional removable armrests with a cup holder in it. So if you want to make it look like 3 recliners with, the shared armrests in between, you can do that with a removable armrest and turn it back into a flat-seated 3-seater couch anytime you want to. And all 3 seats still have power recline and even power headrest if you want that as well. So I like that. I think they're a really good value choice and lots of designs to look through there. So HT Market, HT Design, home theater seating.
And I suggest you never buy anything you haven't sat in. So just go get a couch, and that's fine. Whatever. What do we suggest for completely blacking out windows? He's used blackout curtains before, but a tiny bit of light still leaks in. I use blackout curtains, and a tiny bit of light still leaks in.
Yep.
Here. Okay, that is true. So it's sort of a, how do you minimize that light? And it comes down to just a little bit of preparation on your part, and also maybe a little bit of overbuying or a little overspending. So
there's also the cheap solution, which is inside the well of the window, you install like a blind, so that you have the blind down inside the well of the window, so that anyone looking from the outside of your house looks into that window and just sees normal blinds. Then right behind that, it doesn't even have to be within the well of the window. This can go a little bit over the surface of the walls on the outside of the well of the window if you want to. Aluminum foil, which is very inexpensive and 100% opaque. And then you just put a curtain in front of that, so that from the inside, you're seeing a curtain. From the outside, they're seeing a blind that's installed inside the well of the window. And then you have aluminum foil that actually covers the opening of the window and will 100% block out all light. So that doesn't have to be an expensive solution.
I'm never, ever going to recommend somebody use aluminum foil, because that's just a little too crazy. But that just screams, I don't know, dungeon or something. So
it works, and it's cheap.
What we have done in our kids' rooms, and what we're doing in the rest of our house eventually, we just haven't gotten around to it yet, is we have bought those cell blinds that you can get, and they're not that expensive, and they're pretty easy to hang once you get the hang of it. From like Home Depot or Lowe's, they sell them, but they have the blackout version of them. Okay, so we have the blackout version of those in the windows, and then you put blackout curtains on top.
Right.
So you have blackout curtains in your room, and the blackout cell
blinds
pull
inside.
down blinds inside. So you're doubling up a little bit. Is that going to completely block out the light? No. So your next thing would be to get the industrial. Like, I like the industrial Velcro because it comes in a big double stick thing, and you pull your curtain nice and tight, and you put a little. You cut a little piece and then peel off the backs of both, and then stick it to the wall, and then do it like 2 or 3 times up the wall on either side, on the outside of the curtains. So the curtains are basically pulled taut on the edges, and then it's just a matter of making sure that you've closed the middle. And that's just buying the right size curtain is all that is. And mine go all the way to the floor. That's a big deal, because if you don't have them go all the way to the floor, then the light will go underneath the curtain as well. So, I mean, do I still get some light in? I mean, what I've done, and because I'm super cheap, I haven't done the Velcro thing, because I plan on repainting in here someday. Okay. someday I will repaint in here. And when I do, then I'm going to do this. So for now, my wife has like a 2-pound weight that we got from somewhere, and it just lives on the floor in here because that's my life. So I just tuck that into the windowsill with it holding the blackout curtain in place, and that kills all light from hitting the screen directly.
Okay.
That's what I do. Is it better than aluminum foil? Yes, because it's not as crazy. Jonathan in the CDEN 4.0. I feel like I swear that number goes up every time. First up, Jonathan just wanted to report back on this experience now that he has lived with his Sony VW325ES 4K projector and a 110-inch screen sitting about 9.5 feet away in the first row. He had debated about switching from a 77-inch OLED to this projection setup, and we had encouraged the idea of keeping both displays by using a roll-down screen. But now that he's had it for a while, he says, if your goal is to feel as though you're in the movie theater, do it without hesitation. Which is kind of what we just said to the first dude, or Aras, right, with the drop thing. I'm like, you're going to end up using one and not the other. Yes, the OLED has better black levels and brighter HDR, he says. And yes, he could watch it with the lights on, and whereas he feels with the projector, the lights really need to be off. But the sheer size completely outweighs all of that for creating a cinematic experience. So with 2020 hindsight, it's a no-brainer. And if you want a movie theater at home, then you need a projector.
Fair enough.
And a rant. Okay. So here's this question. He went with a basic fixed frame silver ticket white screen. They said it has a gain of 1.1. What would be the advantage of a more expensive screen? He isn't talking about ambient light rejecting or acoustically transparent or motorized, just a fixed frame white screen that happens to cost more, sometimes a lot more. To be clear, he isn't looking to upgrade. He's just seen the other basic white screens available, and some of them cost a lot of money. Do they really make that projected image look that much better? This is a good question. Mm-hmm. So, what are you getting when you buy a more expensive fixed frame white screen?
I mean, I just want to say this right off the bat. There are white fixed frame screens that are more expensive, considerably in some cases more expensive than the silver ticket fixed frame white screen, that are objectively worse in every way. So the amount of money definitely does not automatically denote better quality in any sense.
So what should you get? Let's just say that. First, I would expect a couple of things. First, I would expect that your gain on your screen and the finish on it to be more to get better uniformity and more accurate. Just full stop. The more money you spend, that's what you should be getting. Was that true? Not necessarily.
Nope. No, there's no guarantee just from the price point. For example, probably the objectively best performing screens that you're going to find are going to be the Stewart film screen ones. And if you are just measuring exactly the light that came out of the projector and then how that light reflects off the screen, when it comes to there being zero shift in the color, zero degradation of the contrast, very, very high uniformity, like you say, edge to edge. That's where objectively you can measure slightly better performance from the Stewart film screen than you would from the silver ticket. That is just factual. It's also like over 10 times the price in terms of the price delta. The silver ticket screens, the reason we're so high on them is because they measure amazingly well for the very low price that they're charging. There is, of course, the frame itself. You could have a beefier frame on the more expensive one. You could have a different securement method of the screen material to the frame. But honestly, the performance that silver ticket is giving you, objectively speaking, is there any slight amount of color shift? Yes, there is. There's a tiny little bit of color shift that happens on the silver ticket screen. It's within the non-visible range for human eyes. It has to be measured with a colorimeter to even know that it's there, which is why we're so happy to recommend it. But objectively speaking, it does exist, and it doesn't so much on the Stewart film screen. So it's that type of thing that it is possible to measure something a little bit better than the silver ticket, but we don't think it's worth it. I mean, Tom got a silver ticket himself, very happy with it.
Right. So, like I said, what might you expect from a more expensive screen? And it's funny because you would think to yourself, well, it'll be easier to hang. You'll have better customer service. There'll be, the frame will be easier to deal with, and that's not necessarily the case.
Nah.
The Silver Ticket and Elite screens, for that matter, they kind of assume you're doing it yourself.
Sure.
Right? They are at the price, but they're like, we have to make this so these people can put this stuff together. Whereas Stewart and some of these other brands that are out there, they're like, no, this is custom installers. We don't have to be, they're going to have the tools, they're going to have all the stuff that they need. We don't have to worry about the method for putting this thing together. They're going to be able to do that because they're professionals. So it isn't necessarily the case that spending more money, it's going to be like a snap to put it up. Sometimes it's exactly the opposite. But like Rob said, you would expect a beefier screen. You would expect better, objective numbers. But with Silver Ticket, and believe me, when Silver Ticket first hit the scene, we were like, this can't be right. This for these prices, this can't be right. And the entire industry just went, oh crap. They did. And Seymour did what the right thing, which is like, okay, we are going to offer objectively better performing screens, and also, a ton of sizes and masking options and all these other features that you cannot get from and also cater to the DIY community. We'll just sell you the material. You want to make your own? We'll just sell you the material. They've done all that to stay relevant, and that's why we continue to support them as well. Because
if all you want is non-acoustically transparent, basic fixed frame, white material, I'm going to point you to Silver Ticket all day long.
Every time. That's right. Until you start asking for custom sizes.
Yeah.
And then we're going to say Seymour AV. Martin in Ireland. I would do an Irish accent, but that would be offensive to everybody, especially the Scottish, because I would probably make it sound more like that. The last time Martin wrote this, he was trying to narrow down his choices for a speaker upgrade. He'd been using Q acoustic speakers all around, along with 4 KEF satellites for Atmos, and a pair of monoprice monolith 10-inch THX subs that he imported and loves, in a room that is roughly 14 by 15 by 7, sitting about 9 feet away. So, cubish. We went through the options on his list and more or less picked out the Focal Cora 806s as probably our top choice, with the Monitor Audio Bronze 100 being well worth an audition, since it's cleaned a lot of praise and costs quite a bit less. I do remember this. So using our advice, he then auditioned what he could in-store and came to the same conclusion. The Focal and Monitor Audio options remained on his list, but now he's added a couple of new ones. And since we haven't let him astray so far, he'd like our opinions on whether or not it's worth seeking them out. So the Monitor Audio Bronze 100s are available for €350, while the Focal 806s cost €590. Which is a considerable price difference. Since he's so happy with his monolith subs, he wonders if the monolith THX 265B would be a good way to go. The problem is he would have to import them. He wouldn't be able to fully return them, as they cost about €570 to bring them in. The other speakers he's now considering are the Arundel 1961s, which he'd have to save up for at their €800 price. He's enticed by the very positive reviews and that they're the best out of his options, then he's willing to wait. And if they're the best. So what's our advice? I'm not going to say anything about these Arundels. I'm going to tell you right now. Those Arundels, they're not going to be on the list when I'm done with it. Audition the Monolith, audition the Arundel, audition both, or go ahead and pull the trigger now and on either the Focal or Monitor Audio. I don't think I would go with either one of these. I think I would just stick with what the Focals.
Yep.
Or the Monitor Audio. I really don't see any reason why these monoliths are going to be worth nearly the same price as the Focals and the Arundels.
No. I mean, importing them and not being able to return them, absolutely not. No.
Yeah, and the Arundels, €800. Come on, man.
I know.
Come on.
I know. And I mean, yes, I know they've garnered a lot of praise because they've done a very good job of marketing themselves. They've come onto the
aren't
scene.
They huge and like?
Well, the 1961s are the less expensive, slightly smaller series, although they are still big. They are absolutely still large.
I thought their whole claim to fame was being sensitive and loud and
not particularly sensitive. They've just got the wide dispersion waveguide on them. But no, I mean, for the price, it doesn't make any sense at all. I know there's a lot of hype about them right now because they've done a good job of marketing themselves, getting themselves out to a bunch of reviewers. And honestly, they measure very nicely. I don't have, if you bought Arendelle, it's not like I'm going, oh, you got ripped off or something by the performance. Absolutely not. The measurements are really, really good. But people seem to be thinking that they're doing something nobody else is doing or something like that. It's like, no, they just aren't. They're a very solid design. They've come in, they've marketed themselves well, but the price point, the physical size, there's nothing particularly amazing to write home about on either of those fronts. So this just happens to be a new, good, I will say, good measuring speaker, but I don't see any reason that you're going to pay a good €200 more than anything else that you're considering. So I say, maybe bring a pair of the Monitor Audio Bronze 100s and a pair of the Focals home, because that should be doable. Bring them home so you can audition them at home. Choose between those two. I don't see any reason to muddy the water with more options than that, and I think pick one of those two. They're available locally to you at reasonable prices.
With mono price, buying them here, they're a deal.
Well, yeah, they're $300 a pair here, so they'd be the least expensive out of all of these. Then it makes sense to consider them. But to import them at double the price what they cost in US dollars and not be able to return them if they're not your favorite just doesn't make sense. Again, good speakers, but no reason to take them over the Focals or something.
And what it basically comes down here is us not really saying that any of these options are bad.
No.
It's just when you double the price or you make the price so much higher by importing them, they have to be better than they are. And maybe they are that good, but they're not necessarily, in comparison to what you're paying for the Focals or the Monitor Audio. Yeah. I just don't think that they're worth it.
No, I'd say you've got two that are locally available at very reasonable price points. Bring a pair of each home, do that comparison, and I think you'll be very happy.
And before you do that, if you haven't already dealt with your room acoustics, for the love of God, please do that first.
We did talk about that with him before, so we should be all right there.
But let's just double down and just remind you that if you are auditioning at home and you're like, well, I'm going to eventually put up some room acoustics, stop auditioning and put up the room acoustics, okay? Because that's way more important, because they'll tell you how those speakers will sound in your room with the room acoustics, which is what you want, because it can make a big difference. Mike, we have seen Mike's room before.
We got some
red
photos to remind here. He's got 3 rows of seats, a wall-to-wall screen up front, 165-inch wall-to-wall screen, and all monolith in-wall speakers all around, including front wides that we talked about before.
Right, the 9 point whatever.
That's right.
6 or whatever that is. Right. Mike really appreciates our advice, and now he's back to ask him more questions for clarification. He had asked if he should go for monoprice's monolith in-wall subs. I hope we said no.
We did.
He was considering putting 2 of them behind his acoustically transparent screen and another 2 in the back wall of his room. And you could put 100 of those things in there. I'd still say no. We went through their performance and cost and suggested that either one pair of SVS SB3000s or 4 SB2000 Pros would give him better 20 hertz extension and plenty of output in either case. But we were eyeballing the small amount of room he has below his massive screen up front and wanted to make sure his choice of subwoofers wouldn't block any of his image. So from the floor to the bottom edge of the screen itself, not the frame, but the actual image, is exactly 15.5 inches. The SB3000 is listed at 15.2 inches high on SVS's website, while the SB2000 Pro is listed at 14.2. So either should fit, right?
I'd err towards the smaller SB2000 Pros, because you're going to want to put some kind of decoupling system underneath there, which is going to add at least a half an inch.
Yeah, so. I was thinking about those the SoundPath isolation feet. I'm like, those are over an inch, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they're
right
an
about
inch.
an inch. They're about an inch.
Yeah, they're up there. So I don't think you could go with the SB3000s.
Yeah, I'm leaning 2000 Pros here.
Yeah. Okay. So he likes the idea of ending up with 4 subs, but he wouldn't get 4 right away. Otherwise, he'd be eating nothing but peanut butter and jelly for the next year. I mean, I like peanut butter and jelly. He always likes to tinker with this theater and doesn't mind running Odyssey several times. So putting subs at the back of the room is no problem, as he planned ahead and has outlets pre-wired back there. So would SB2000 Pros truly be plenty? You could start with a pair of those, whereas he'd probably start with just one SB3000. But would 4 SB3000s honestly provide no benefit over 4 SB2000 Pros in the end? Yes, they would provide no benefit. Now that I have decided that infrasonic sound doesn't matter anymore,
everything about this is making me lean 2000 Pros, because if you can get 2 of those right away, as opposed to only being able to get one SB3000 Pro right away, you definitely want to go with the 2 right away. It's going to physically fit better at the front of the room. It's honestly going to be easier to fit them in the 2 rear corners of the room as well. And yes, once you have 4 of those, the 3 decibel difference between the output capability of the 2000 Pro and the 3000 is nullified by having twice as many of the 2000 Pros and getting you that 3 decibel difference right back. So everything makes me say go with 2000 Pros.
I honestly don't think you need 4 subs.
Oh, he's going to get them eventually anyway.
I know he is.
But this way he gets to start with 2 right away, and you'll be happy right off the bat.
Yeah, I think so. Be prepared to be exceedingly underwhelmed by your
adding the other 2
subs after that.
It's SVS, you can send them back.
Just be prepared that at the end of adding the extra 2 subs, you go, I think I can hear a difference. I'm like, yeah, you're gonna have to start seat hopping like quite a bit. Like you should do it before and after. So he says he will follow our advice, we'll see, and wait on getting butt kickers for his middle row, which we correctly guessed are his primary seats. He also looked into it further and agrees he'd go with the full-size butt kicker LFE rather than trying to cheap out with lesser bass shakers. But will 4 subwoofers really make butt kickers completely useless? Dude, just buy 2 subs and get back to us. You know what I mean? I mean, at this point, all this hypothetical crap, just buy the 2 subs,
worried, Tom.
Crank them, and then see what happens. He says, will 4 subwoofers really make the butt kickers useless, or could having butt kickers actually interfere with his future 4 subwoofers in some way? Would it be an issue in terms of his receivers, processing, or connections, or is it just that it's like going beyond 4 subs where it's a really huge diminishing returns? I mean, okay, there is no doubt in my mind that the butt kickers will do something that you will experience.
Oh, sure, you'll feel them.
There is no doubt. My experience with butt kickers in all their various and sundry forms, everything from being in a showroom that was showing Spider-Man 2 and had like the seats that moved around with the vibration and everything else, to having sitting on a seat that was on top of a box, a riser that vibrated with the subwoofers, to just having good subwoofers in a room. There is no doubt in my mind that just having the good subwoofers in the room gives you exactly the right amount of couch shaking, because it is natural. And I rarely say that as, like, even with food, like people are like, I don't like GMO. I'm like, give me all the GMOs. I want the GMOs. I'm a GMO guy. Give me that. You know, I like my corn to pop, not to be like whatever maize was back in the day where you had to treat it with lye. This your couch shaking with your subwoofers, your body shaking with your subwoofers, all that stuff happens. Like you notice it, but you don't. You know what I mean? There's a big difference between that and then having your couch say, hey, there's a 10 hertz there's a 10 hertz note. You can't hear it, but I know it's there. So bump, 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 and your couch starts shaking. You're like, what is actually going on right now?
But if you are set on it, you absolutely can add them later. There's no problem. It's not as though your receiver needs to, I don't know what he was really concerned about there, of some kind of interference in the signal. There's going to be a single subwoofer output coming out of your receiver. You are then going to want something like a mini DSP in between the receiver's subwoofer output and the butt kicker amplifier. That's where you're going to want to have a mini DSP that essentially undoes the equalization that Odyssey is applying for your subwoofers, because you do not want to send an equalized signal to the butt kickers. You want the butt kickers to just get a completely un-EQ'd signal. The way we're going to achieve that is by basically undoing, creating the inverse of the Odyssey EQ inside of a mini DSP. So by having the Odyssey EQ and then the inverse of that EQ applied by the mini DSP, we get back to the original un-EQ'd signal. But it's no problem for the AV receiver.
Yeah. The AV receiver's not going to care. He asks, what about using ButtKickers with headphones? If he plugs in headphones, that mutes all of the speakers. So is there a way to use ButtKickers with headphones to give him the feeling of deep bass with that headphones cannot provide? He's using a Denon X6700H. You go Y splitter on your headphone output.
That's one way. Also, and this is actually something that retroactively what I just said about the mini DSP could actually give you a situation where you don't need the mini DSP.
Right.
Is the X6700H does have the ability of playing the exact same source out of zone 2 at the same time that it's playing in the main zone without altering what happens in the main zone. It just creates a stereo down mix of that same source for zone 2. So you could use the zone 2 pre-out. It's a little bit tricky because you, of course, have to turn zone 2 on, and then you have to set zone 2 to source. Like, there's a name in there just called source, which then duplicates what's happening in the main zone. But that would be a way of accomplishing this, having the same signal. It would be a full band front, left, and right signal coming out of the zone 2 pre-outs. You would feed that into a ButtKicker amplifier and make sure that you're using the ButtKicker amplifier's low pass filter to filter out everything that isn't the deep bass. But it could be done with the zone 2 configuration. So, and that's a way to also do it for your main zone seats if you wanted to, without having to use a mini DSP, because the zone 2 would not have any equalization applied to it. So that could be a way to do this.
For acoustic panels, he intends to go DIY. Is there an actual benefit for making a frame? A friend of his asked, wouldn't a wood frame just be a surface for sound to bounce off of rather than be absorbed? He was wondering if he could just use adhesive spray to stick fabric directly to the bats of insulation, then hang them on the wall with a nail. So there's the hardening stuff we've talked about on this podcast before.
You can search for duct butter. That's what it is. It's the stuff that you slather onto HVAC ducts to seal up all the seams, and it is a mastic that hardens, and it works perfectly on insulation. In fact, it's what you normally use if you, say, cut a piece of insulation and then want to seal the cut in that insulation. You use duct butter, this hardening mastic. So it's inexpensive. You can get a big old tub of it, and you could just slather that around the edges to harden the edges of the insulation and wrap your fabric directly around the insulation. People have done that. It absolutely can work, and that's fine. However, that's still creating a hard reflective surface around the edges, just like the wood is. And you don't really want to just try and do spray adhesive directly onto slightly squishy insulation and just try and stick your fabric on there. That isn't going to hold very well at all. You do need some kind of hardening agent around the edges. So normally people just use the wood frame because it's fairly simple and used to be really cheap. Now that wood costs an arm and a leg, that's a bit what's led people to try and get away from the wood frames, but that's really all it is. But yeah, the duct butter would work if you want to do it that way.
And I can't stress enough how unimportant the reflectiveness of the frame is for compared to the absorptive qualities of everything else that's going on. That little bit of wood around there, I mean, if you took that off, right, and then let's just say that in a perfect world, you could somehow keep your insulation bat absolutely absorptive all the way around and still wrap it in fabric and still hang it on the wall. Let's just pretend you could do that. Okay, you can't, but let's pretend you could. Where the frame would be a hard reflective wall right behind it. So all you've done is move the reflective surface forward a little bit and maybe added some side area, which you could call diffusion if it makes you feel any better. And it really doesn't. What you're talking about doing is so not worth, in my mind, the trouble. And it certainly is not going to have any sonic benefit. Not one that you may be able to measure it, but that's not one that you're going to realize in your room. You're not going to hear it. You're not going to say, these ones have the duct butter treated edges and blah blah blah, and these ones don't. And when I swap out the panels, the difference is immense.
You'd never hear
it's going to be absolutely nothing as far as your ear is concerned. So, just to me, whatever is the easiest and the cheapest for you to do is the one you should do. Lastly, he says he's seen DIY panel videos in which they build a frame with a gap of air between the insulation and the wall. Does that actually serve a purpose? And the answer is it absolutely does. So if you put 4 inches of insulation directly onto your wall, like you mount it flat, it has a certain effectiveness. Let's just say whatever. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. I mean, it absorbs a certain amount.
Yeah, it's about 100 to 125 hertz is about how low you're getting with that.
Yeah. If you take a 2-inch piece of insulation and you install it in a wood frame or whatever, and then with a 2-inch air gap, it has about the same performance.
Very close to the same performance using less material. So it's a bit like getting deeper frequency absorption for free. So that's the reason that you would build it with an air gap behind there.
So the obvious reason for doing this is cost.
Yeah.
It's and so weight. Much cheaper. And weight, yeah, but the weight's, to me, the weight is fairly immaterial. But because it's not, you don't need the hanger that could hang the 4-inch thick one will hang the 2-inch.
But like the 4-inch thick insulation with a 2-inch air gap, that gets you right down to that 80 hertz crossover zone that we're concerned with. So that's why it's very beneficial. Rather than trying to have 6 full inches of insulation, it's a lot easier to get insulation that's meant to go in 2x4 studs and then give it a 2-inch air gap behind there.
Right. So it just gives you more performance for less money, essentially, and less weight, like Rob said. Daniel uses a BenQ HT3550i projector, and he's still on the original lamp. He has a replacement lamp on hand, so he's ready whenever it needs to be swapped. His projector is his primary display, and it gets about 5 hours of use a day. He wants to thread the needle of getting the most usage out of each lamp while keeping image quality optimized and not risking the lamp going pop. Now, there's really nothing you can do about that last part, but you can hope. The user menu shows the number of hours for each lamp mode. He sticks with the brightest mode, which is normal, and hasn't used the eco or smart eco modes at all. But there's also an equivalent lamp hour number given. So what number should he pay the most attention to, and at what point should he replace the lamp? He hasn't gotten any warnings or pop-ups yet. Should he wait for one or replace the lamp before any warning ever shows up? I mean, I assume that BenQ has some sort of pop-up that will tell you need to start thinking about changing your lamp.
Yeah, actually,
and I would wait for that.
Yeah, in the manual, they say there's actually 3 warnings that will pop up. They'll give you a warning that says, order lamp.
Really? That's convenient.
Which they're saying like, oh, you're getting kind of close. And they actually say right in the manual, if you want to keep your projector at peak performance, never let it get to the point where it's even slightly noticeable that it's starting to dim, then go ahead and replace the lamp when the order lamp notice comes up. That's at the point where the lamp is starting to age and starting to dim. And if you want to maintain peak performance, when the first warning that says order a lamp now comes up, go ahead and replace the lamp and you'll stay at peak performance. That's according to their own literature in the manual. There will be a second warning that says replace lamp, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's time to replace the lamp. And then they have a third and final warning that says replace lamp now, which, it's really time. In fact, the projector will start automatically turning itself off after a period of time once you get to the replace lamp now warning. So I think that basically says it in their own specs. They say normal mode, the lamp should last 4,000 hours, and the equivalent lamp hour thing, which they have a whole algorithm of working out in case you're switching between eco and normal mode and stuff. 15,000 hours is the number that they say is when that should be time to replace the lamp. So that's about it.
The algorithm is not that hard to figure out. If you're only using normal mode, it's ×3.
Yeah, right.
That's all it is. So when you get to 5,000 hours on your lamp, it's gonna start screaming at you.
Yes, it will.
So, or 4,000 is when normal mode. So, anyways, that's what it is. Dale is asking on behalf of a friend. Oh, we've heard this one before. His friend has a dedicated theater room, roughly 17 by 15 by 8 feet 9 inches high. He sits about 9 feet from a 110-inch screen. We've got some images here. The screen is gray, which I love. He's got we'll probably talk about that in a second. Everything's brown. It looks like he might have some acoustic panels in the back. It looks like there's one.
Yep, there are acoustic treatments in the rear corners and in the back of the room there. And all the speakers are in wall.
There. Oh yeah, everything's in wall. That's right. And the room is tan for the most part. He just upgraded his AV receiver to the Marantz SR7015 from Accessories for Less after Dale told him how we recommend them all the time. He now wants to upgrade his Epson 6040 UB projector to a 4K model. He's considering the new Epson LS12000, but has now expressed how he wants a true 4K model and not Wobble K, because somebody's been on Reddit. So we have any thoughts on what projector he should get, and where's a good place to purchase from? Well, when it comes to lamps or projectors, we always say go to AV Science. Is that
AV
what
Science, yeah. And I mean, don't just order directly online. They are a company that you want to call them, or at least contact them by email, because there are better prices to be had. And they say right on their website, there are things available that are not listed on their website. So please call us and talk to us, because you will absolutely get deals that way by talking to them directly. So, I mean, honestly, if you're just going by price point, the Epson LS12000 would be probably your least expensive way of getting to a projector that can fully show you 4K at 120 frames per second with HDR. Now, is it technically Wobble K? Yes, it is, because the panels themselves have 1080p resolution, not 2160p resolution, and each frame is shown 4 times to give you that 2160p resolution, but it really does look exactly like 4K resolution to your eye, and it is wobbling that panel around 4 times per frame fast enough to do it at a rate of 120 frames per second. So there's really nothing to worry about there as far as the, you know, quote-unquote Wobble K in this case. You are not losing a single pixel of resolution with the way that it does it. The only thing that doesn't put me over the moon about the LS12000 is that it does not have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. If you want frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, you are looking at a $2,000 more expensive projector in JVC's NP5. Now, I actually, in a rare instance of a $2,000 price difference, can say that it's fairly justified if you're the sort of person who really cares about the best black levels you can get from a projector, the highest contrast you can get from a projector, and the best looking HDR that you can get from a projector. The JVC offers that, and I think manages to justify its $7,000 price point for the MP5. But if that's just too expensive, which would be very understandable, I have no problem with the LS12000 if you are just no way, no how am I getting a projector where the panels are 1080p. The Sony VW325ES is the one that falls exactly in the middle. It is $6,000, so price-wise it's exactly in the middle. It is actual 4K panels. There's no wobbling going on, but it does not have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, and the black levels and contrast are not quite as good as the JVC. So it falls right in the middle in every way that you can imagine, and the price points ultimately make sense that way. So it would be those three. It'd be one of those three. All of them are available from AV Science. Give them a call. Talk it through with them. They'll give you some very good advice on that as well. But yeah, it would be one of those three.
All right. Bertrand in Quebec. After a Sony receiver in his living room ended up with only one working channel, he went ahead and bought the Fosse DA2120C we suggested, and it's working like a treat. Since it includes a subwoofer output, he hooked up the home theater in a box sub he's had lying around for 15 years, and while this 2.1 setup clearly doesn't match the quality of his dedicated home theater, it's fine for casual TV viewing. So we wanted to say thanks for the recommendation.
You
There's
are
the
welcome.
Fosse amp there.
I'm glad that worked out. It has a little remote too, which is obviously nice for TV viewing.
The living room speakers are from an old 5.1 speaker package. One of those speakers died a while back. He still has 2 more on hand, so replacements are aplenty.
Mm-hmm.
He's been curious to try out a 7.2.4 instead of 5.2.4 in his theater, and his Marantz SR8015 can power all 11 speakers on its own without needing to add any additional amps. But would using a pair of these 5.1 speaker package satellites actually be giving surround backs a fair shake? Would they tell him anything useful, or are they such a mismatch to his Martin Logan series speakers that they only mislead him about whether or not he actually wants surround backs? You don't. That's just me. Okay. So I am notoriously underwhelmed by surround back speakers. And that's mostly because my rooms have not been super big. And there's been very little benefit to having them. Even though I will say in this theater, they have more benefit than other theaters. But whatever. I mean, to try that out,
Yeah.
I have no problems with you doing this. I feel like
What's the harm?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think what he's afraid of is he's like, oh, they'll sound like crap, and then I
Right.
will hate it. But if you notice them sounding like crap back there, then they're doing something that could be, in theory, beneficial. You don't have to have them sound perfect. You just have to have them be noticeable. If you put them in there, you're like, I think there are speakers back there, then you know that it's not worth the extra money. Because that's really what you want to know is, do I hear them?
Yeah, am I going to go buy
Full
another
stop.
pair of Martin Logan Motion Series speakers to match all my other ones just for the surround backs? I think this is still a worthwhile thing to try. Because you already have the speakers, and what's the harm?
Yeah, and like I said, you're not going for this perfect, tonal match between all the rest of your speakers.
If you have a circling pan and you notice the timbre changes when you go through the surround backs, you will know why that's the case.
Yeah.
It's not that surround backs inherently have a timbre mismatch. It's because you know the speakers are a mismatch. So that's okay.
Ryan has a semi-dedicated home theater in the basement of his townhouse. It's fully enclosed, roughly 12 by 18 by 7.5 feet high. He says semi-dedicated because it also serves as his work-from-home office and with his computer desk at the back. That's what I want. I want to take take this couch that's on that back wall back there out and put a desk back there, and I want to work in here. His main seats are 8.5 feet from his 65-inch OLED, not big enough. Ryan and his wife prefer to sit at the back of the theater when they go to the movies, so maybe it's big enough for you. So they're fine with a smaller field of view. He made DIY acoustic treatments for the standard 3.5-inch rock wool insulation. Honestly, got as much room treatment as he's willing to put in there, so there won't be any more added, which means you're ready to start upgrading speakers. He's got a self-described Frankenstein sound system. He hates paying full price for anything. I'm with you. So he finds deals and puts everything together a piece at a time. At the moment, he's using KEF Q150 bookshelf front speakers with his Paradigm Premier 500C center. His surrounds are SVS satellites with 4 KEF in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. He started with a Pinnacle brand baby boomer subwoofer that he still has in the front left corner.
That's the name of the model.
I can only imagine.
That's what it is.
It uses dual opposed 8-inch drivers and just says low end response 23 hertz, which means it will move.
That's right. I'm sure
I
that's
don't know that it'll make any sound that you can hear.
-12 dB point or something along those lines. Yeah. No.
He added an SVS SB1000 Pro in the rear right corner to make it a 5.2.4 configuration. However, his current Sony DN1080 receiver only goes up to 7 speakers max, so the 2 pairs of overhead speakers are wired together in series right now. Okay.
That's the setup.
Okay. I'm looking at all this stuff. Okay.
Got lots of pictures, been showing them on the YouTubes.
Over the next several months to a year, he'd like to make several upgrades one at a time, so we'd like our advice on what would make the biggest, most worthwhile difference at each stage. So he really loves his Paradigm Premier 500C center, so he'd like to eventually get matching front, left, and right Paradigm Premier bookshelf speakers. The other upgrade ideas he has in mind are subwoofer and AV receivers. So should he get the new front, left, and right speakers first? And if so, should he get the Premier 100B or the larger Premier 200B model? Okay, so I think you're going to get the one that you find on sale. Like it really
There's
matters
that.
which one we say.
I will just say the 100B is the one that has the exact same drivers as the center that you already own. And given that the distances and the room size are not gigantic, I don't see much reason to pay more and go larger than what matches the center that you already have. So I would get the Premier 100B if you end up doing that.
Okay. I can get behind that.
Yeah. And then should that be the first thing he does, or are we going to go... So, I mean, I think actually we can go through the rest. We know that what's coming up, and we'll answer what we think you should do first, second, and third once we get through all that. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So we'd like to have 2 matching subs, given the room size and the fact that they never listen at full reference volume. Typically, they're at least -10 on the master volume. Is he correct thinking that SB1000 Pros will be fine? Is he doing himself a disservice right now by using the Pinnacle Baby Boomer sub along with a single SB1000 Pro? And should getting a second SB1000 Pro be his top priority? It's very hard for me to say top priority, but it's way frickin' up there. You know what I mean? Like for me, It's only because the rest of your speakers are all good. Like there's
Right.
nothing in here that screams to me needs to be replaced right away. Like you didn't say your KEF speakers and your Paradigm speakers are not playing well together.
Right.
Maybe you say that later, but you haven't said it yet. And it seems to me that would be the first thing out of your mouth when you talked about wanting
And I mean,
to
I wouldn't
upgrade your front
expect
speakers.
those two speakers to be
I wouldn't.
so far apart that it's unlistenable. So
Yeah. And you know, you guys have got your seeing distance. You've got your room treatments in here. I really feel like that. I mean, I haven't even clicked on this baby boomer thingy yet.
Oh no, I mean we know what it is. So I mean the SB1000 Pro, I mean we've talked about in this very episode a similarly sized room where it's like if you did want to hit full reference volume, you're sort of right on the borderline of where an SB1000 Pro might not be able to get to a full 110 decibels at 20 hertz, whereas an SB2000 Pro could. But he said they never listen at full reference volume, -10 at the most. So I think you're fine with 1000 Pros in this room because you're just over 1500 cubic feet. You're right there where the SB1000 Pro kind of isn't able to fully pressurize the room anymore. So I think you're fine given the way that you're going to use this. I don't really think you're doing yourself a horrible disservice by pairing it with the Baby Boom. It just means that probably everywhere below about 35 hertz, you will really only have one sub because I don't think that Baby Boomer sub is really doing anything below 35 hertz. But from 35 hertz up, you're still getting the benefit of the dual subs across the room from each other. So I don't think it's a terrible thing that you're doing. I don't think you're really doing a whole lot of harm. And I do think you would glean a nice upgrade because you've got a pretty big seating area. So for this whole seating area, I think you'd have a nice upgrade by getting the dual SB1000 Pro subs. And I'll reserve what we say about which you should do first until we talk about your AV receiver.
Okay, so he's leaning towards replacing a Sony receiver with the Denon X3700H. He likes the idea of having Odyssey dynamic EQ since, as we mentioned, they never listen at full reference volume. But should the 3700 be the first thing he gets? Are there less expensive alternatives? Should he maybe wait to see if the next generation of Denon offers 9 or 11 speakers in a less expensive model? I mean, that is going to be the case.
That's what I mean. So my inclination is that you are going to get the biggest difference, given everything that you already own.
Yeah.
You are going to get the biggest difference by changing the receiver, because right now you don't have 4 overhead speakers. You have 2.
Yeah, you have 2.
And
you have
would
a Phantom center.
Yeah,
you have a Phantom middle one.
You'd be getting all the benefit of Odyssey that you've never had before with the Sony. You'd be getting the dynamic EQ, which, you know, this is... Yeah, there are other ones that do something similar. Yamaha's do something similar, but they don't cost any less, and they still have HDMI 2.1 problems that I'm not happy about. The Onkyos and the Pioneers with Dirac don't have an equivalent of dynamic EQ, which is a feature that you want. So I do think Denon and Marantz is the way to go in your case. I actually think you'd get the most noticeable difference getting the new receiver first. But then I run into this thing of that we went a whole year because of the pandemic without any replacement models at all, which is unusual. You're still running into the silly thing of the X3700H has one HDMI 2.1 input and no switching. We are fully expecting that by the end of this year, 2022, there will be new Denon and Marantz models.
Yeah, Cedia is looking pretty likely.
Yeah, exactly. But that is towards the end of the year. So then it's a question of like, well, you can absolutely hold on to whatever money you have right now and wait to see what comes out. Because it's not as though you're suffering right now with nothing to listen to whatsoever. You'd just be staying pat for now. Or I would venture that if you're just burning a hole in your pocket, want to buy something right now, it would be the second SB1000 Pro. Because I don't envision the KEF front speakers with that Paradigm center being a problem. It just doesn't strike me as where you would notice a big difference. So I would normally say receiver first, then sub, then your front left and right speakers in this particular case. But because I'm fairly strong on waiting on the AV receiver to see what comes out at the end of the year, either save the money and wait or get the subwoofer first. That's my order.
So I don't want to call it a problem here, but when I was reading your question, my first thought was you're already got so much KEF in this room. Why not just change out that center channel? But you said you love the Paradigm Premiere. I'm like,
yeah, he really loves the center. Well, he's hearing the voices from that. There's no question about that. So he really likes
I don't know that. I wonder how much you would love a KEF center.
Is it really that much of a difference in price either way, though? Because, I mean, the Q series and the Premiere series are pretty equivalent. So,
Violet, stop it. So, yeah, okay. I see what Rob's saying. Right. It's very hard because this is what's going to happen. They're going to release the new... At some point, they're going to release new or announce new receivers. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, Accessories for Less is going to get flooded within the next couple of months with the receivers from right now.
Inexpensive 3700Hs?
Yes. And then you're going to be right back to us saying, should I buy this one that's Accessories for Less or get the brand new one?
But that's going to be fairly easy to determine based on the features.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's just going to be a matter of the price. So.
The real question you have to ask yourself is, do you game? And do you need more than one HDMI 2.1 input? Because if you don't, if you're like me and you're like, there is no chance I'm going to be in here doing 120
And you can add
whatever.
the external switch to the X3700H. It's not as
which is only, what, $200? I mean, that's...
for the Switch.
And you could probably get that used because there's a lot of people out there who got it and then upgrade the receiver, and now what are they going to do with the dang thing? So, I don't know. I
can see why he's in a dilemma and asking about it. But I've given my solid answer, so if Tom's wishy-washy, you can go with mine.
He does feel as though there's a hole in the sound directly behind him. He hesitates to bring it up. I can't imagine why. But should he or could he add surround backs? Based on your room, I'm going to say no because of the massive bookshelf that's behind you. But... So you've got two pairs of overhead speakers that you have wired in series.
I see where you're going with this, yes.
Yeah. So if you really feel like there's a hole in the sound behind you, why don't you see if you can fill it with those two that are behind you by labeling those as surround backs instead of...
Right, because you're probably not getting the new receiver yet if you're following our advice. So
right. Yeah. So that would be the basically 7.2.2. So you would have top fronts.
Yeah. Only problem there is, of course, he can't actually do that with his current receiver because it tops out at 7 speakers max. But you could try it. You could try 7 just regular floor level speakers, wiring the overhead rear speakers as your surround backs instead of having any Atmos speakers. And you could just try it out to see if that fills in the hole.
Let's be dead honest here. You are not going to put speakers in that bookshelf, or where they should go, and so you're going to want to put
a little bit too wide apart on either side of the bookshelf, or they'd be way up high above the bookshelf. That seems like the only reasonable.
And I think that's where he's going to end up putting them, which would not be angle wise. It's not great for them using that and also Atmos.
Right.
Those 4 overhead Atmos speakers. So you know. I think you're going to end up with 5.2.4 is what you're going to end up with because there is really no place for you to be. Yeah. There's really no place for you to put surround back speakers. But if you really want to test it out, you can. You just use those the rear overhead speakers as your surround backs and just see what it sounds like for a while. So, unless you really are planning on getting rid of some of the stuff on that shelf and taking it up with a bookshelf speaker or whatever, or putting some sort, because really you're going to have to put it right next to your desk where it looks like there's a monitor, or up higher, and then you're going to have to move or remove your room treatments, which I would say I'd much rather have a room treatment there than a speaker.
Right.
Or they have to be too high.
I like the idea of repurposing what you already have to give it a try and see if that's what you want.
Bill, how much time do we have left here?
I'm hoping we can get through at least Bill's. I wanted to get through more, but we dilly-dallied.
That's your fault. Bill jumped the gun. We discussed his theater plans last week, and we said if it was up to us, we'd probably get all new speakers, and we suggested a complete setup from SVS that we thought would work nicely. Well, before he even heard our suggestions, he had gone ahead and ordered a complete package of speakers from SVS during their July 4th sale, almost the same complement of speakers that we recommend on the podcast. He's open to matching our suggestions exactly, since SVS is so good about returns and exchanges. It was fun to have all the speakers arrive on a pallet.
Yep.
And there they are.
That's what SVS does, all right.
Yeah, they just wrapped that thing up and shipped it to you. Rob was keen on the Pinnacle Towers, the Prime Pinnacle Towers with the Ultra Center. Bill went with Ultra Towers and Ultra Center. He quickly tried them out, and he thinks they blow away his old DefTech's BP10 towers. So would the Pinnacles be any better somehow? He certainly doesn't have any regrets with the Ultras. Dude, they're already in your house. There ain't no force on earth that's going to get me to put them back in that box and send them back.
No, there is no reason that you need to send those back and swap them for the Pinnacles. Technically, the Ultras have the more expensive tweeter in them than the Prime Pinnacles, so on that front, they're fine. It's just the Pinnacles cost a little bit less, have a little bit more slender form factor, but as long as you are perfectly all right with the physical size of the Ultra Towers, you got really, really good speakers. No reason to swap those at all.
All right, so we ordered only one SVS subwoofer. Sacrilege, Boyd. Haven't you ever listened to this podcast? This
Well, he hadn't before he ordered this.
So then he ordered the SB1000. I don't remember the size of his room, but I imagine, based on the fact that we said towers, it probably is bigger than the SB1000. Yeah. He was thinking he could pair that with the Mirage Omni S12 sub that he already owns, but he's very open to sending the SB1000 back and getting either a pair of SB2000 Pro or the SB3000s, as we suggested. Oh, we suggested 3000s?
He's got enough room size that if he wants to hit reference volume, SB3000s would be the right choice. I think you would be fine with 2000 Pros. So that's.
He asked what's going to be the most worthwhile. I would not pair an SB1000 with this Mirage in any room.
No.
But definitely not this room.
And the SB1000 wouldn't be my choice for the size of room that you have. Yeah. Now, I just said, I think the SB2000 Pros are the butter zone for you, because the thing is, if you're the sort of listener who is like, you know what, I'm already relatively happy with the Mirage S12 that I have, and I think the SB1000 is fine, then you are going to be blown away by the 2000 Pros. And I don't think you sound like the sort of person who is demanding 115 decibels at 20 hertz from the SB3000. So I think the 2000 Pros are the butter zone, and SVS, you just ordered these speakers, they will absolutely be happy to take back the SB1000 and send you two 2000 Pros in its place. There will be no problem.
Yeah, I'm not going to cry about that. We had suggested using Prime Elevation speakers as surrounds and surround backs, and then using Sonance Mag 6 in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. He went with Prime Elevations for Atmos. And Prime Satellites for surrounds. Would switching out the satellites for Prime Elevations provide an improvement? He was thinking the Prime Elevations that he ordered will be sent back only because he ordered all the speakers in gloss black, but then we showed the gloss white versions on the podcast, and now he's enamored with those. Since the Prime Elevations are going to be mounted up high for Atmos, he agrees the white finish will look even nicer.
There's no reason you need to replace the satellites with Prime Elevations. No reason.
I think they're the same. They're the same speaker basically. I mean, they're remarkably similar. They're just different shapes and mounting options. So I don't see any reason why you would have to. I guess we suggested this because.
Well, I had the suggestion of having Prime Elevations, which are available in that white finish, because I thought they'd be easy to mount. And just looking at the way his room was, I was like, maybe the surrounds and the surround backs end up mounted a little bit higher, so the built-in angle of the Prime Elevations would, make that sense. And then I had suggested the in-ceiling speakers, but I have no beef with having front heights and rear heights instead, and having those be Prime Elevation speakers that are mounted up high, and then a pair of Prime Satellites as your surrounds. Great. No reason to replace the Prime Satellites. Yeah.
All right. Infinite Gary, last question here. What was our journey into multi-channel speakers with subwoofers? Gary's first non-stereo setup was a Panasonic quadraphonic receiver. If you don't remember, which you shouldn't, because nobody should. Quadraphonic was, you're supposed to put a speaker in each corner of your room. That was
pretty
the
close.
idea.
Yep.
There was actually a radio station that I received in the town that I grew up in called Quad 106. And it was one of the first, if not only, radio stations that did send out music in quadraphonic sound for however long it was around. Then he went to a Fosgate that was the first to do a version of stereo to multi-channel upmixing before Dolby Pro Logic. Then he had a Citron 7.0 that he eventually traded in for a Lexicon MC12 that he still owns to this day. Was that the question?
I mean, I knew he wanted to share what he had, so I'm going to include all of that. But what was our journey to multi-channel? Did we have a stereo setup and eventually get to multi-channel, or what? What did we do?
No, I went straight from headphones basically and TVs to surround sound because I heard a friend's surround sound system and went. I always wanted one of those like Kenwood, or whatever they were called. The Sears catalog ones with the record player on top and the smiley face equalizer and the dual cassette and everything else. But I never got that. I circled it every year for Santa to get it for me, but Santa apparently was broke.
Yeah, so
did not know that.
For me, for movie watching, I went straight from TV speakers to a RCA brand home theater in a box, 5.1 home theater in a box that came with a passive quote-unquote subwoofer, if you even want to call it that. I think it was a 6-inch driver in that hollow one-note box that thumped out something, nothing good, but it was
made noise.
I worked at my very first job was working at a video store. So when DVD came out, I was like, hey, this Dolby Digital thing that's on these DVD discs, I kind of want to hear that. And there was a very affordable RCA 5.1 home theater in a box, and that was my first thing. So I jumped straight to it. That was my journey.
Yeah, I traded a guy for his system as he was upgrading, and it was a Panasonic receiver and a bunch of mismatch. I think he only had two. He had just two speakers, and they were both, I think, Panasonic brand as well. I might be wrong about that. I really don't remember. And I slowly filled out the rest of it by buying stuff. And then that receiver eventually failed on me. I bought an Onkyo that was analog only. It didn't have any digital inputs. Or there were digital receivers out there, but it was too expensive for me to afford at the time. And then from that, I went to Denon. He says, if you look at all the logos printed on your AV receiver, Dolby, DTS, THX, IMAX, etc., is the receiver manufacturer paying a licensing fee to all of those?
Yep.
If so, could we estimate how much of the receiver's MSRP is going towards all those licensing fees? I have
no idea.
No clue. None.
No
one would ever say.
Absolute guess. So useless to come from us.
Yeah. So let's say that you've got a setup without any subs, just a pair of speakers. Would it be better to use a pair of speakers that can play flat down to 40 hertz or ones that start to roll off at 50 hertz? Would there be instruments missing from the 50 hertz speakers? It depends on what you listen to. There are, I wrote an article about this, about extension, subwoofer extension, or just music extension, which shows a graphic, which I stole, I guess. I don't know. I think I hope I credited it in the article, which basically shows where every instrument kind of falls off.
Yeah.
And they do. I mean, like pipe organs go way down below 20 hertz.
Yeah,
not way
you
down,
could have
but
a
they go
16
below.
hertz fundamental on a full-size pipe organ. That's the only one that was that low.
But, like bass guitars, kick drums, and stuff like that, they get pretty low. Oboes, they get pretty low. So it depends on what you're listening to. I mean, are you listening to the throat music guys or whatever? Are you just listening to, recorder, like the recorder?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, like lowest note on a piano, just your standard, grand piano, lowest note on that. What is it? I think 28 hertz, right around there, 27 point something, I think, is the very lowest note on a grand piano. Your double bass is getting down to, I think, 32 hertz or 36 or something like that. So, I mean, in terms of, is the speaker even producing the sound that some of these instruments might be making? This is how often is the very lowest note on a piano ever actually used? How often is the open string on a double bass actually used? I mean, maybe not that frequently in most music, but certainly if something with a double bass, it could be below 40 hertz, in fact. So yes, it's very possible that a speaker that is rolling off at 50 hertz, there are notes that are simply not being produced at all. But then the issue is, even on the speaker that is playing down to 40 or 35 hertz or something like that, the speaker itself might be producing that note, but in all likelihood, you won't be hearing it accurately because the room is going to take over. And that's why we want to use subwoofers even for music. I know there's still a whole bunch of people who are like, oh, the ideal is to not have subwoofers for music. No, because we're listening in a room, and if we want to address the way that the bass frequencies interact with the room that we're in, then we can't be limited by the placement of where our front, left, and right speakers go. So it's a almost a double-edged sword having the speaker actually produce those notes, because yes, in the one case, you're just not having the notes produced whatsoever, so you can't hear them inaccurately, but you also just can't hear them full stop. In the other scenario with the speaker that's playing lower, the note's being produced, but you almost certainly aren't hearing it accurately. So pick your poison. Would you rather not hear it, so no damage really done, but you missed something, or you hear it, but not the way you were supposed to? which is better? And then even with the 40 hertz speaker, there's going to be a handful of notes that are lower than that speaker can play.
Yeah. I was just looking at like around 40 hertz. I mean, there's quite a few instruments that do go that low. I mean, maybe you're not listening to them. Like, you know, how many times are you listening to tuba music?
Yeah.
But synthesizers...
And like we say, that's going to be the lowest note of that instrument. So how often is it actually used in the music?
Bass sax, stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. It kind of depends on what you listen to.
It's certainly much lower than any voices, though. If what you care about voices, 50 hertz is well below even the lowest bass singer. They're not getting that low.
All right, who do we have left?
We have Mike, Dazz, and Ilongo. Yeah, that's it. Right. There we go.
Ilongo, we haven't heard from him in a while.
I know.
All right, I want to thank our listeners this week. We want to thank Dale and Bill for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 138 patrons over at patreon.com, including Daniel and Bertrand. Thank you very much. Yes,
for sure. Dale, Bill, thank you for the PayPal donations, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go to make an automatic monthly donation. Big thanks to our 138 patrons, Daniel and Bertrand. Thank you for being two of them.
So I want to thank Dale for letting us for sending a gift card to Rob.
Yeah, thanks,
Granger, Dale. For pointing out the SVS, had given us a shout out. Joseph for shouting us out to Electronics for Less in Canada, and Bill for sending me some photos to use for AV gadgets.
Thank you, Gurinder. Thank you, SVS. Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Bill.
Lastly, I want to thank those who have thanked us for keeping this podcast going, including Dale, Mike, Daniel, Ben, Bertrand, Dazz, Ryan, and Joseph.
I'll say them one more time. Dale, Mike, Daniel, Ben, Bertrand, Dazz, Ryan, and Joseph. Thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude to us. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.